everybody? It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood law num. Welcome back to another episode of Stats, Trends, and Picks. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Well, we are officially into September, which means there's a lot of things that people are excited about, whether it's football, pumpkin spice, anything. And of course, there are things that some people are not so excited about, like having to go back to school, or in my wife's case, having to go back to work after a long summer break. But I am still very excited for September just because of the fact that we are starting to see the cool air come in. For August, it was definitely a very mild month in terms of weather and not that many extremely hot days like in July. So now we're definitely getting the fall feel. The air is crisp, and I am just very excited for the last 4 months of 2024 because these are going to be massive comic book reading months for me. And this is just because of the fact that there's so many things that are just getting me so excited, whether it's big events, writers and artists that I love taking on new books, or revampings of current titles I'm currently reading, as well as new story arcs. So let's take a look at how we did in August of 2024. So I thought it was going to be a much larger comic book month, but unfortunately there were a lot of books that were pushed back because of some delays. There's one that I specifically am going to mention because I do have a lot of good things to say about it. So I ended up with 46 books for the month, and just as I thought, Image would still be riding high, and DC was still going to be remaining constant, but the interesting thing is there was a tie between Marvel and the other conglomerate. But the thing that I'm very happy about the other, which includes all the other major indie companies outside of Image, is the fact that we're now starting to see somewhat of a constant, because we started off low and then we really started creeping up slowly, and now we're hovering between the 9 and 11 book range, and I'm thinking that September all the way through December we're going to see this number spike a lot, and unfortunately Marvel is just going to stay right where they are, because I have been seeing what Marvel has coming out all the way into November at this point in time, and I have no interest in what's going on in the world of X-Men. I have no interest in what's going on in the world of Spider-Man, even though Zeb Wells is officially leaving the book and Joe Kelly is going to be on the book. Joe Kelly is a great writer, but I'm just not interested in anything outside of the ongoing Hulk series by Philip Kennedy Johnson and the Ultimate Universe, which is still very much intriguing me. But then let's take a look at the percentages, and we see that almost 35% of my purchasing went to Image, when just a little over 26% went over to DC. DC is going to stay in this realm, and I think there's also going to be a small jump just because of the DC All-In initiative in the Absolute Universe, not to mention some very special maxi series that are coming out towards the end of this year. And then, of course, we see the chart. Yes, the Image line dipped a little bit just because there was a smaller amount of Image books, but still, they are now a clear distance away from all the others, and I personally am very excited to say something like that, even though a lot of people say that the downfall of the big two could spell doom and gloom in the end of the Western comic book as we know it. This is really where Image is going to have to step up their game, and I still am going to say this year they have truly stepped up their game. Whether you're reading Jeff Johns' Ghost Machine universe, or if you're reading Robert Kirkman's Energon universe, or if you're going over to Dark Horse and you're reading all the new Mark Miller World books that are coming out. They just started coming out like gangbusters in August, and there's still more coming in September and October. So I think the indie books are really going to step up their game and continue to drive the sales instead of the big two. But who knows? Maybe DC All-In will surprise. I am personally going to be cautiously optimistic, while a lot more people are going to be extremely pessimistic, but I want to keep a clear head and a clear mind, because I hear the names of the writers, I hear the creative ideas, even though they are not to people's liking, but I want to give it a shot. I just have a good feeling, and I hope that I'm right about that. So how did we fare in August of 2024? Well, I am going to say it was a relatively decent month in terms of comic book reading. There was a lot of good stuff, but the thing that made me a little upset was the fact that there were a lot of books that got delayed. So let's see how I did in the month of August. So I did okay. Only one book ended up being in my top spot that I predicted correctly, but there were some reasons as to why, and I'll explain that right now. I did get my first prediction of August of 2024 correct. I gave it over to DC Comics Absolute Power issue number 2 from Mark Waid and Dan Mora. The core story of this event in DC is pretty darn good. I'm really appreciating Mark Waid's writing. Once again, I feel like a broken record. I know a lot of people are dumping on Mark Waid, but I am always going to be, whether you like it or not, a separate the art from the artist kind of guy. And as long as Mark Waid is writing good stories, I'm going to keep reading his stories. I still love Batman Superman World's Finest. I heard that he's going to be doing a maxi series called Batman and Robin Year 1, which I am so excited for. It starts in October. But Absolute Power, at least the core story, has been something truly great. And I am really excited to see how the last 2 issues of this event take place and how it's going to shape the DC All-In initiative. For the second week of August, I did not predict correctly. I gave it to the brand new title over at Dynamite Comics, Jonny Quest number 1, written by Joe Casey. And the reason why I didn't get this prediction correct is because this book got delayed at my local store. The books came on time, but they came damaged. So it took a little bit of time for this book to officially come back to the store and for me to get my copy. It is now September 5th when I'm recording this video. Yesterday was the first new comic book day of September, and lo and behold, my Jonny Quest number 1 did arrive, so I read it, and I want to say this probably would have been, if not my top pick, it would have been in my honorable mentions because I loved this first issue. It reminded me so much of the TV series. Jonny Quest is one of my all-time favorite cartoons next to the Jetsons, and just knowing that there's a comic book title, and once again, Dynamite just giving me so much to love through nostalgic names in the world of popular culture. This is no different. I loved this first issue, and I'm so glad that this issue arrived at my store this week, because next week issue number 2 comes out, and I'm praying that this book does not get damaged either. So because of the fact I wasn't able to give it to Jonny Quest, I ended up going back to Image Comics and going back to the Energon universe, which is not a bad thing at all, and I gave it to Transformers issue 11 by Daniel Warren Johnson. This book is still great. Even with Jorge Corona doing the artwork instead of Daniel Warren Johnson, that's not a bad thing. I actually picked up Middle West, which was a great book that was written by Scotty Young with art by Jorge Corona. So the artwork is great in this book as well. Though the big announcement was that Daniel Warren Johnson said he's going to be leaving this title in issue 25. I don't want to be upset, and I don't want to be afraid that this book is going to go in a downward spiral, because I don't think Robert Kirkman is even going to try and let this book fail. I think he's going to get a big name to write this. Hell, he may even write this book himself if he can't find anybody. But I am sure he's going to find a great writer to take Daniel Warren Johnson's place after issue 25. But Daniel Warren Johnson is going to be giving us some titles very soon, so I'm very excited. But for now, Transformers issue 11, it's heading towards the end of the second story arc. This book has been an absolute winner along with the rest of its Energon Universe counterparts. For the third week of August of 2024, I actually was thinking that it might have gone to a Marvel title, and I was going to give it to the first issue in the Wolverine Revenge miniseries by Jonathan Hickman, artwork by Greg Capullo. The artwork is stunning, and the story was interesting. It's an alternate reality story. I don't know where this book is going to go, but I will say that the first issue was fun enough to get me excited for the next issue. But I was happy to report that for the third week, it ended up becoming a tie for 2 specific books, just because I couldn't decide which one was better. They were as different as night and day. It was Dick Tracy issue number 4 from Mad Cave Studios, and Powerpuff Girls issue number 2 over at Dynamite by Kelly Thompson. The Dick Tracy story has been one of my absolute favorite reads. I love this take on the character. We're wrapping up the story arc in September, and then it looks like the book is going on a hiatus. I don't know when it's coming back, but I hope it does soon, because this has been a fantastic read. But what I loved so much about this Powerpuff Girls book was just because of the fact that it was such a fun read, and it just felt once again like its first issue. Another Powerpuff Girls episode, but this was much better. Maybe it's just because of the fact that Mojo Jojo was in this issue and I love him so much, and the story that Kelly Thompson gave me was so fun and entertaining. This has been a great title so far, and like Daniel Warren Johnson leaving Transformers, I found out that Kelly Thompson is only going to be writing one more issue of Powerpuff Girls, and then the artist who is doing the artwork currently is going to be the writer on this book. So I don't know how to feel about this. I'm surprised that Kelly Thompson only stayed on for 3 issues. Maybe it's just because of the fact that she's got Black Cloak to write over at Image, as well as some DC titles that she's working on. I know she's wrapping up Scarlet over at Image as well next month. But I will give the 4th issue a shot just to see if the writing stays the same. If I have the same kind of enjoyment that I've had with these 2 issues, and most likely the 3rd issue, I'll continue reading Powerpuff Girls. But for now, these 2 books, red hot for me. I love them both. For the last week of August, and New Comic Book Day of the last week of August of 2024 was my birthday, so it was exciting to come to the store on my birthday and just chat with the people a little bit. I wanted to give it to the Ghost Machine Universe's Rook Exodus number 5 by Jeff Johns and art by Jason Fabok, but apparently this book came out in the first week of September. And I will also say that this is a book that I have read. I am not going to tell you what I thought about it, because for all we know, this could end up being my top read of the first week of September. So because I couldn't get my hands on Rook Exodus until the following week, I ended up going to Image Comics regardless and giving it to Rick Remender's The Sacrificers number 11. This is the wrap-up of the second story arc. So The Sacrificers was my favorite comic of 2023, and when I read issue number 7, which was the start of the story arc earlier this year, I didn't enjoy it, and I got very, very scared that this book was going to crash and burn, especially considering the fact that I also picked up Rick Remender's Napalm Lullaby, which came out this year, and after the first story arc was done, I dumped the book. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But I will say that after issue 7, this book just went right back to where it was and reminded me why I loved The Sacrificers so much, and the end of the second story arc with this issue was so powerful, and I am so excited for when we get to start the third story arc with issue number 12. So that was where August was, so what's going to be in store for September? So there's a lot of good things coming out. It's going to be a massive comic book reading month for me, but that's always exciting because I'll be reading and that's all that I care about. So for the first week of September of 2024, I am going over to Boom Studios. It is great to say that Boom Studios is giving me some titles now that I'm no longer reading Ghost Lore because it's over. And Cullen Bunn has got a couple of other things out there right now and some new stuff starting this month as well, which I'm very excited about. But Jeff Lemire is back with his very first long-form series since Sweet Tooth, and it is Minor Arcana. He's going to be doing the artwork as well as the writing. I don't know if he's going to do the artwork for the entire series. Most likely the answer is going to be yes, because they did the same for Sweet Tooth. But I am looking forward to this book just because I look forward to anything of Jeff Lemire's. I love his art style, and I love how he writes his stories and how he develops his characters. Fish Flies was his last book that I read, and I loved it, and I just always get excited for when Jeff Lemire has something to write. The fact that he's going to be also going over to DC, the fact that he's going to be writing a brand new JSA title for the All-In Initiative makes me excited, as well as the fact that he is also going to be writing one of the Absolute titles in 2025, provided everything works for Absolute. So, for now, Minor Arcana, very excited for this first issue. For the second week of September, we've got a landmark issue over at Image Comics. We've got James Tynion IV's 25th issue of the Department of Truth. I have been loving this brand new story arc. This book just doesn't disappoint me. I love revisiting it. I know that Cammie and I still need to talk about the last 2 story arcs because we're now officially getting into the thick of the 5th story arc, but this one has definitely been a gem for me, and I'm really curious to see how it's going to wrap up. For the third week of September 2024, I am actually going to go back to Image Comics, and as I said, Daniel Warren Johnson has a new title coming out. It is a maxi series called The Moon is Following Us, and Riley Rossmo is going to be doing the artwork. Love these two people, and very excited to see a very interesting, different story from Daniel Warren Johnson, because if there's one thing that Daniel Warren Johnson is so good at is he's got a crazy imagination, and even though I've never met the guy, I'm sure that this guy is a big kid at heart, because he always gives me so many interesting things. I actually have the trade of Murder Falcon. I have to read it, so I'm very excited to finally read that, but The Moon is Following Us, the minute I saw his name attached, I was like, hell yeah, gotta read this book. And for the last week of September of 2024, before I get into that, I also want to say there's a big project coming out this month at DC. We're going to be getting the third and final installment of Batman The Long Halloween. If you loved the original one from Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, you probably also read the second story, Dark Victory. Well, we all know that we unfortunately lost Tim Sale, unfortunately way before his time, so there was apparently a new Long Halloween title on the way, and it's going to be a 10-issue maxi series plus an issue number 0, which is coming out in September. Batman The Long Halloween, The Last Halloween Prologue. It is going to be done by Jeff Loeb with art from Tim Sale, and then there's going to be the 10 issues that are all going to be done by different artists. There's going to be A covers drawn by Tim Sale, but I actually am going for the variant covers set because there's just a variant cover set that I couldn't pull myself away from, and they looked so great. So yeah, I know I should be collecting the Tim Sale covers, but when you see something you love, you just gotta go for it. But the fact that this is more of a book that's going to honor Tim Sale and everything that he did for comics. I think Jeff Loeb is doing a great thing for him. So I'm very excited to see how this last Long Halloween arc is. But the book that's going to be my number one read of the week is a book that I have been so excited for because I caught myself up earlier this year, and it is over at Dark Horse Comics. We are getting the first of the last story volume of The Magic Order from Mark Millar. We've got The Magic Order 5, and the fact that we've got Matteo Buffagni coming back to work with Mark Millar again. He's worked on a couple of other titles with him. This is going to be something that I really hope is good because I have read the entirety of The Magic Order and I love it to death, so very excited to see how this final arc is going to begin and see how this story wraps up, because I believe once this story wraps up, we get the TV series over at Netflix. So Mark Millar, I praise you, and I am looking forward to reading this final installment of your work. And that is going to wrap up another episode of Stats, Trends, and Picks. Please leave your comments in the box below. Let me know what you felt some of your favorite reads in August of 2024 were. Let me know if there's anything that I missed. What are you looking forward to in September? And what are your thoughts on some of these things that I've talked about? Are you excited for the DC All-In initiative? Are you excited about anything that's going on over at Dynamite with all of these brand new nostalgic comic book titles with nostalgic characters? And in the meantime, everybody, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.